I'm going to read you a part of the book where my mother's name is Arya in the book, and she lives on a farm, and her dad just gave her this bicycle as a gift. And she's so excited because now instead of having to walk to school, she can take this bike to school. In the morning, Arya dashed downstairs to wipe down the bike again. Everyone was only just stirring from the cock's crow, and sunlight had just begun spilling its sticky heat onto the world. She tried to swing herself up onto the seat, but having never ridden one before, it proved trickier than she imagined. Several tries later, with no luck at even getting her thigh over the seat, she realized this thing was much too big for her. She leaned it against the wall and stepped back. The bars and seat ran almost the same height above her waist. Krystal, my mother says, laughing, your grandfather gave me a real big bike. So big, I couldn't even ride the thing. But if I didn't take it to school that day, he sure take it away from me and give it to somebody else. Arya waited for her siblings to scamper on ahead of her after their morning duties were completed. She couldn't bear the thought of their jeering if they realized she couldn't ride the bike. Once on the main road, the house and path a speck in the distance, no cars careening around the bend, Arya hoisted herself over the seat. She crashed both left and right, landing hard on her knees, gravel embedding itself in her skin. Determined to learn, she tottered from side to side, her schoolbooks getting banged up in the process. With school now over 3 miles away, she arrived, decorated with cuts and scrapes, but having learned to stay on a couple of seconds at a time. After winding the metal chain around her bike, she snapped the lock into place and tugged hard to test its security, ensuring it wouldn't budge, lest someone attempt to steal it while she was in class. Patting the key into the pocket sewn into her uniform blouse, she smiled and shook dust out of her hair before heading to the morning lineup. Arya tucked her chin shyly into her chest, trying not to make eye contact with anyone else. This one-floor school looked the same as her last. Each classroom was separated from the next by a wall, the patterned cement blocks permitting breezes to ruffle the pages of their copybooks throughout the day, cooling the thin film of sweat on their brown bodies. The teacher, whose class she was assigned, had 3 items on his desk: a leather belt soaked in water, an old-school grater, and a guava branch he stripped and wielded as a whip. Edith, try and use at least one of them every day. A girl with an opulent plate leaned over and informed Arya when she noticed her fixated on the grater. Arya just looked at the girl's black braid dangling at her waist and said nothing. Because of her constant tardiness, she'd been subjected to each of these punishments before, and while they were all painful, kneeling on punctured steel was the worst of the 3. Several times throughout the day, lunch, recess, and quite a few bathroom breaks, Arya hustled to the back of the school compound to check on her most prized possession. Her heart rested when she saw the red, black, and silver bicycle, lumped with a handful of others, pristine against the rusty chain fence. During her last class of the day, giggles erupted around her, passing like a stringed explosion from one person to the next. Students put their heads down on their desks to gaze at their laps, and when they looked up, they gave one another knowing grins. Arya glanced at the teacher, and her eyes shifted from his moving lips to his 3 weapons. As more laughter punctuated the silence their teacher demanded when he spoke, Arya hoped that whatever was happening didn't end up on her. Because of her ragged appearance in tattered seconds, too large or too small, her mud-splattered legs and the chicken feathers waving from her curls, she'd often been chosen by the wealthy groups of girls in class as their scapegoat. They thought of her as a joke and often jeered at those who worked on farms before coming to school. Why all you even bothering to come to school? Is on a farm you go end up anyway? Arya longed for uniforms like theirs, pleated and pressed, made by the hands of an expert seamstress, not shoddily slapped together like hers. Their hair smelled of citrus and coconut. Their braids were looped behind their earlobes and fastened with silk ribbons. Rising from his desk, their teacher cleared his throat, giving them all fair warning that he knew something was going on and intended to figure out what it was. His eyes scanned their desks and faces, searching for a culprit. The girl with the thick hair next to Arya slid a book in her direction. Without thinking, Arya reached for it and gasped as she looked down. Before her was a pornographic magazine. On the cover was a picture of a nude woman with her legs wide open, her fingers dangling nonchalantly before her privates. Her breasts appeared engorged. I forgot about this part. Her nipples flat and round like fried bake. Never had Arya seen anything like this. Uncomfortable with even her own body, she never lingered on her womanly parts, but showered and changed as fast as she could, covering these bits she thought offensive. The flurry of movement and sound from her direction drew the teacher's attention to her, and he started walking down her aisle. Not knowing what to do, Arya slipped the magazine into her textbook, folded her trembling hands in her lap, and looked down. "Sing?" he said, to which she had to answer, "Yes, sir?" But he said nothing else, sweeping her desk for a telltale sign. All the giggles had gone now as he rapped the edge of his ruler on her desk. He tapped her book, then slid the ruler between the pages and flipped it open to the magazine. Arya shut her eyes and felt her neck and face flush heat. No amount of saying it was not hers would convince him. She was sure of this. He slid his ruler beneath her chin and forced her to look at him. In his face, she found a look of puzzlement. It told her that of all the things he expected, this was not it. There was a chance he'd believe her. No words passed between them as he tucked the magazine into his armpit and carried on class for the rest of the allotted time. Never had this happened. Corporal punishment was freely doled out for students talking too much. For this, he could flog her in front of the whole school, and everyone, including her parents, would pat him on the back and tell him that he did the right thing. Someone rang the brass bell with exaggerated arm flaps. Last bell of the day. "Sing?" Arya looked up as she was beckoned by her last name. Everyone else scurried out of the room. No one looked at her. The teacher rapped her report book with a ruler. Arya's attention strayed to the courtyard. Through the lattice work of cement blocks, Arya looked for her chained bike. If she was to endure punishment, then at least she had something to look forward to. "Make sure your mother sign here and here," the teacher said. "Okay, Miss Singh? Sing. You have something better to do than to listen to me?" Arya shook her head. He said nothing of the magazine, mundane words about parental signatures and her marks, and that was all. There was more talking, but she couldn't concentrate on the words her teacher was forming with his lips. To everything she replied, "Yes, sir, yes, sir." And when he was done, she slipped the thin report book into her hands and dashed out the door. "Krystal," my mother says to me, laughing. "You say nothing, and me say nothing either. Who knows? Maybe he keep the book for himself." In the 10 minutes or so it took to listen to her teacher, almost the entire school had dispersed, save a few troublemakers, the same factions everyone tried to avoid. Arya unwound the chain lock, lifting and threading gingerly, but it clanged against the metal poles. She hopped on the bike and tried to kick off, but ended up wobbling away, the wheel bucking under her like a donkey. They looked up at her, but no one budged. A steady trickle echoed from the ravine alongside her. About a quarter of a mile down the road, Arya felt someone's presence. A tall Creole boy was lumbering behind her, the look of malice bursting like stardust from his eyes. By the span of his shoulders and his height, Arya could tell he was easily 4 or 5 years her elder. She'd seen him around, knew of him, even though she was a village over. "He didn't go to school anymore, Chris," says my mother. He'd a fairly common entrance exam too many times, and family was poor, that poor, so plenty times we see him begging all over the place. Arya hopped off her bicycle and jogged beside it, the spinning of the wheels click-clacking next to her. His footsteps quickened behind her, thumped the pitch. Then everything went black, and she heard the ringing in her head before she felt the pain. Her right temple throbbed where he'd punched her in the head. No words came from him, just his thick fingers snapping around the handlebars and yanking the bike from her. "No!" Arya screamed, pulling it right back, her book bag swinging from the front of the bike. Grunting, the boy shoved her back with both arms, and Arya toppled over, the bike crashing down on top of her. "Chris, you must be mad for me to let go and run," my mother says, "and let Mr. Shiva catch me coming home without that bike. He go kill me for sure if he see that. What I take from that boy and nothing to what he go give me if I reach home without that bike." He stood on top of the bike, forcing the pedal into Arya's stomach. She screamed and retched, but never let go. Stooping down next to her, he unhooked her backpack from around the handlebars and flung it across a ravine as thin as a serpent's tongue next to them. She watched it sail across the strip, landing with a soft thud. Thinking she'd scamper after it, he pulled the bike up, bringing Arya standing with it, her hands still fastened around her gift. The boy sneered and growled in her face. "Fucking let it go." Arya butted her head into his. He slapped her across the face before walloping her on the back, hoping to break her enough to make her release her hold. But she never did. After thrashing and then yanking at the bike until he was spent, the boy gave up and sauntered away. Her body ached with each step, blood matted to her head, bruises forming along her arms and legs. "I cussed that boy all the way home, Chris," my mother tells me, "but I wasn't letting go. It's hit for hit whenever I could let go one in the ass." Her body throbbed and burned in different areas, but a feeling of triumph surged her forward as she trudged the rest of the way home, that bicycle still in her grip. By the time she crawled through the bushes at the side of the house and scoped out the front to make sure there was no one around, she'd incurred more cuts and scratches and crosshatches along her face, back, and arms. Uncovering one of the barrels of rainwater at the side of the house, she scooped water out with a bucket and doused the burning all over her body. For a few seconds, coolness prevailed before her injuries screamed out again. Red padded Velcro parts protecting the bike were ruined. They'd been shredded and pounded into the dirt. She ripped them off and stuffed them into a bag to add to their heap of garbage. Now it was all garish silver, the only other color the black rubber tires that she'd cleaned for the second day in a row. She stashed it away and limped down the hill to catch up on her work for the day. Her siblings noticed her wounds, but they each had their own scuffles to deal with, and the only way they could help was to hasten their duties to help her finish hers. "They're jealous of me for getting that bike, Chris," my mother tells me. "But if one of we slack off like that, then all of we get licks. So it's help they helping me for their own skin." Just for a moment, Arya considered telling Avinash. They'd grown incredibly close over the years, closer than she was to her own siblings, and she wondered if he and his brother Jaeger would retaliate for her. But she knew Avinash would be jealous of the bike too, and rather than risk all they cultivated, Arya let it go, leaving her to wonder if this boy would attack her again. Then, with genuine concern, her elder brother Raoul reached across the abyss between herself and her siblings and asked ever so tenderly, "Arya, girl, you all right? What happened?" And Arya, broken and exhausted, told him everything. "And I left the book bag right there, Raoul. It's still there," she said. "May I know what Papi go do if I go back tomorrow and it's gone? All my school books and supplies." The softness in his features had taken on transformed before her. His eyes grew stony and his brows knitted together as one. "Where now, Arya? Where the book bag? Come with me, let we go." "Now? What about Papi?" "They go cover for we," he said, gesturing at the rest of their tribe, but she was doubtful they could get everything done before their father returned. Raoul dragged her back toward the school, but on the way he veered off the path to ask one of his friends for a ride. "Oh God, Raoul boy," his friend said, "I can't wait for you to get your own car the way it is, order me around, drive me here, drive me there, na boy." "Man, this ain't no time for foul speech," said Raul. Some mother cunt done gone and beat up my sister. Let we go. Driving, the trip was painless, and they reached their destination in minutes. The boy was there with a few cronies, digging through Arya's school bag. "Oi!" Arya hailed him, leaping out of the car before it came to a stop. "I see you wrong here, I know who you is. You feel you could beat up my sister and get away with it?" Raul's strides were long and matched the rhythm of his upper body, his shoulders taut and square. The boy's friends all looked all scattered, leaving the contents of Arya's bag in the dust. "You!" Raul said, grabbing him by his collar, lifting him up and ramming his back into the tree. The boy did nothing, didn't even squirm or fight back. Raul was taller, broader, and stronger by far. To anger him would only make things worse. Her brother's grasp was tight enough that the boy's shirt began to rip, and even though he'd just beaten her up, Arya felt sorry for him. The whipping her brother wanted to give this boy could prevent him from walking for days. "Raul," Arya interrupted. "It's all right. Left him now. Look, all my things here." Arya stooped down and scooped everything back into her backpack, dust and all. "I don't know why, Krystal," my mother says to me. "I just watch the way he watching Raul, like he's so used to getting beat up, and I just didn't want Raul to beat him up anymore. A little roughing up was good, but no lash or nothing." The boy looked Raul in the eye, but what he revealed was utter sadness. Raul seemed unable to hit him, despite his arm being cocked for a punch. Instead, he shoved the boy's back into the tree over and over again, threatening, "If you ever mess with my sister again, I go kill you, you hear me? I go throw your ass in that ravine and nobody go find you. Now gone from here. Gone your mother ass, yeah?" Raul didn't look at her as they clambered back into his friend's car. They returned home shortly before their father and rushed to help everyone finish up. Arya searched for something in her brother's face and his actions that united them through this experience. No one had ever cared enough to defend her before, and she yearned for a more profound connection with one of her siblings. But Raul didn't give that to her. By the next day, all was forgotten, and the gallant brother she witnessed returned to the brother who ignored her, too busy with his older friends, cars, and beer. To prevent her bike from being vandalized, Arya rode past the school and chained it close to Avinash's house, just on the outskirts of Sandy Grande, a village much less remote than hers. It was her chance to glimpse a different village, so when Arya collected her bike at the end of the day, she desperately wanted to explore more. She had no time, though, and was too afraid of getting into trouble. Whenever her father sent them all into town for market trips, he always ordered through clenched teeth, "Straight there and back," and she listened. "He lived closer to the school," my mother says to me, "but where he lived, it had more people and more cars and everything, real different from where we living up in that bush. It just looked and sounded like a brighter place. I just wanted to be closer to glimpse it, you know? Stick up in the bush there all the time." Thank you so much.